Welcome to Macro Code, and today we are going to build a RESTful web API with ASP.NET Core 6. So our demonstration today is mostly about RESTful web API using ASP.NET Core 6 and Entity Framework Core. So .NET 6 is the latest LTS release currently, and it will be supported until November 12, 2024. So we can use it new project. So we'll click create new. So when you click there, we will be looking for ASP.NET Core. We can actually search it, ASP.NET Core Web API. So I'll be looking, there we have it. So we have ASP.NET, a project template for creating ASP.NET Core application with example controller for a RESTful HTTP service. So click that one, then next. Then we give our project a name. So I'll sample API for employees. Let me just call it employees API. So that is my location. Next, so I'll choose, as we had indicated, we'll be using .NET 6.0, which is the LTS release currently, and it will be actually be supported until 2024 on November. So, but we also have .NET 7.0. So I'll actually show the difference between these two releases on our next videos. So that is it. Then, so after we have given a name, you can leave it at .NET 6. Then we just click on create. On the other ones, you can leave it as it is. So it is creating our project. So there we are. So we have our project. We have a controller called weather forecast, which is the default controller. Then we have our program.cs. So if you come to the packages, so if also you are not conversant with .NET Core packages, refer to our previous videos for installation of Entity Framework Core. So you can see we have a swash buckle.asp.NET Core. So this one is a package. It is actually a dependency too for the Swagger. So we'll also do a video for how to do on mostly about Swagger. But for today's video, we'll be showcasing just how to create an API. So if you have just done that, then you can actually try to launch the application. If you just launch it, application is launching. There we are. So you can see we have our API. So this is the employee API, and already we have a get method for retrieving weather forecast details. So if you just, so you can actually try to get the data. If you click on try and just execute, you can see we have our data. So this is the response. So we have our data here. So that is, we have just created our API. This is the link, and this is Swagger. So we'll do a video about Swagger on our next session. So you can see on the URL, you can be able to use. So these are now the endpoints that our API has. So the URLs are being shown on Swagger for these get method. So if you actually come here and type in the name of the controller, weather forecast, the way it has been declared here, forecast, then you press enter. So you'll see we have these data that Swagger is actually displaying. So Swagger provides kind of a UI so that you're able to see these data in a very good manner. So when we have just run our application, and you can see we have these here. So back to our application, we have the app settings.json. So this is where we'll be configuring our database connection. And on our program.cs, this is where we'll be adding our services. So you can see on this program.cs, we have Swagger already declared and injected to this service. So we have it here. So what we need to do now is to create a model for employees, assuming we have not connected this to the database. So we want to create another. So we are creating an API for employees. So I'll create a folder. So we'll stop this. So I'll create a folder name models, then a class employee entity. So I'll call it employee, a domain class employee. So after that, I'll provide some fields. So this will be our primary key. You can actually do this on the primary key, or you can leave it the way it is. You can say it is the key. So our next, so we'll do employee name, employee. So this will be string first name. So this will be first name. Then our next will be middle name, then surname, then we have email address, then we have phone number. This is integer. Then we have you can have it as full phone number. Then I think this is fine. So as you can see on these fields, the strings kind of contain an null value. So if we want this to be required, so we have actually defined now our fields. That is for the employee domain class. So if we want these to be not to be nullable, so we can just put in is equals then null, then you put an exclamation mark in front of it. So this one will be a required, these fields will be required. So application will see it as a required data. So that is how you define it. So after we have done that, we can now define our DB context. So the ID field is our primary key, which is actually required. So next, before we do that, we can actually install Entity Framework Core. So you'll come here, then manage nuggets. Then here, just type in entity framework. Entity framework. Entity framework core. There we have it. So I'll install version. So I'll install version 6, or even I can take 7. But the stable version is 1. Okay. So I'll just install the latest stable version. I accept the license terms that is installed. So EF-Core, if you are not conversant with EF-Core, please check on our videos about Entity Framework Core. So EF-Core is actually an object relational mapper framework that simplifies the data access code. So model classes don't have any dependency on the EF code that we have just created. So they just define the properties of the data that will be stored in our database. So we'll be using a code first approach in when we are dealing with this API. But if you want to learn more about Entity Framework Core, please watch our videos about installation of Entity Framework Core. So we'll add another nugget, that is because we want to connect this to SQL Server. So we'll be looking for Entity Framework Core SQL. So this is it. So I'll also install it. Then I'll also install tools. That is it. So those are the 3 nuggets that you need to install. So after we have done that, then we need to create our DB context. So the database context that class that we need to create coordinates the entity framework functionality for data model. So this class is created by deriving from the Microsoft Entity Framework Core DB context from the nugget that you have just added. So I'll create a folder called context, where it will be holding our DB context. Then I'll create another class called employee context. So this class will be a derived class from DB context. So we'll do that, DB context. That is it. So we need to import something. So you can hover on the DB context and you'll be able to see this one. So you can add it Entity Framework Core. So it is actually a direct, as I just indicated, that DB context is the main class that coordinates Entity Framework functionality for a data model. So after we have done this, we'll need to define. So we can do this public. So we are just creating our DB context. So this is our constructor, DB context, then options. So if you are not conversant with this, please check our previous video on how to do this. So we are doing DB context option. Context options. We want these. Then here we have our DB employee context. Then we have our options. Then here the base, that is fine. So now we have done that. So entity framework terminology. So we have something called an entity set, typically which corresponds to a database table, and entity frameworks corresponds to a row in the table. So we have just created our DB context class. So in entity framework terminology, an entity set typically corresponds to a database table, and an entity corresponds to a row in the table. So the name of the connection string is passed into this connection string by calling a method called DB context option. So we'll be able to see this how we will be configuring. So after we have created our DB context, we need to define our database connection on the app settings JSON. So I'll come here, I'll just copy one of my, there we are. So I've just copied it. So we have the connection string. So the default connection string, so we put in the name of the server, that is for the SQL address. Then the database name is the employees. Then we have ID, the user ID, then the password. Then to avoid trust certificate issues, you allow that, and you can allow multiple active connections.
So since we have done that, so you can actually define now your connection at app settings.json using this approach. So, but if you are not conversant with it, check on our previous videos on creating a crude ASP.NET application. We actually went through this in detail. So after we have done that, we need now to register our database context to the built-in IOC container. So what we'll do, we'll come here at the web application just here. So what we need to do, we need to add services here. So we'll come and say builder dot services services dot add db context, db context. There we have it. So then we put in our db context class. You can just copy it here. Then we now define our options. Okay. So options equals to, so it will be options dot use SQL. So you are using SQL Server. So this will be builder dot configuration. So we are trying to get our connection from app settings. So the name of our connection was, so you'll come here and you check. So this is the name, default connection. So we'll have it here. Then that is it. So we have just registered our DB context to our application. So we need another one here. Yeah, so that is it. So we need now to create database migrations. So we actually did a video about migrations, core migrations. So migrations allows us to create a database that matches our data models. So these are our models that matches this one instead of creating them manually. So, and we can actually update the database schema when our data models changes. So we'll be able to do more about data migrations in our next video. So to migrations, just come to tools, then Nugget package manager, then the console. Then from here, we can type in add migration. So there's something we have left. So come back to our DB context. We need to define our database, our table. So we will come here, say public DB set. That one. Then you provide our model, which is employee. Yes. So then we provide the name of our table. So we want this to be named employees. So we can give it that name. So this is now what will happen. So after we have done that, we can now come back to tools, then Nugget package, then you do that. So this is now our entity that will actually represent the table. So let me do this again. Yeah, so add migration.
then we can call it initial migration or call just initial. So then press enter and wait for the migration to run. So we have an error. We are saying unable to create an object of type employee context for the so there's something that went wrong. So I'll come to our program.cs. I'll be able to see something. We'll add db context, employee context option, then use SQL Server, build a configuration, get connection string. I think that's fine. We can try to run our application. We see, yeah, that is where the problem is. So yeah, we have an error on our app.json. So we'll come here and see what is the issue. Yes, this is the issue. So that is how it is. So we'll come back to our migration. I'll just stop our application, then come back to our, yeah, so you can try it again. There we are. So our migration went on successful after the issue. So the issue was on app settings.json. So we had this was not closed properly, which is now okay. So it will create another folder. If you are keen to the application, we have another folder called migrations. So then we have it will create now the SQL statement that will need to create our table. So you can see create the table with name. Then our ID column is here, which is a primary key. You can see it as enable the constraint, then the first name, middle name, surname, email address, and phone number. So if you open the database SQL Server, so I'm using SQL Server Management Studio. So I have my table. So I have my database called employees. So let me just remove this. I want to show you how it does. So I also want to remove this. So our tables are now empty. So currently, if you just run the migration without adding migration, this has not affected our database. So to effect the changes on our database, we use a command called update database. So if you update database, then press enter. So it will now create our table with the name employees. So you can see these are commands, how it is executing. So you can see this is clearly an SQL statement. So then it is done. So if we come back to our database and refresh, there we are. You can see we have our tables. So this EF migration actually keeps in the migrations that you apply to your project with the versions. So we have our table for employees. So it has ID, first name, middle name, surname, email address, and the phone number. So that is good. So we have created our table using code first approach in Entity Framework Core. So our next thing is to create an API controller. So come to controllers, then new, then controller, then so we want an API controller. Yeah. So if we create an API controller, so we want to create an empty one. So just click add. or you can just let's just create using entity framework core because we are using it. So controller, so API, then API controller with actions using entity framework core. So if you add it, it will ask us to choose the model. So we want to create for the employee, then we choose our database context. So it is actually a drop down, you can select it. Then the controller name will be employees, so I leave it as that, then add. So it will scaffold and give us all the details about our controller. So it will give us all the methods of our controller. So it is generating. So remember to subscribe, guys, to keep us motivated in posting our next videos and tutorials. So it is almost done. It is updating. There we are. So our API is already done. So you can see under controllers, you'll find now another new API called employees. So we have the root. For now, we will be traversing to our methods. So we need an API, then the controller name, which is the employee controller. Then it has actually even done injection. So it has injected our. So it has actually done. So this is so if you come to our. So if you see on this controller, you will see that we have the root. So the routing of the API. So this is the root of the API. So the URL path for each method will be constructed after this root. So the controller parameter here will represent the name of our controller. So ASP.NET Core routing is actually case sensitive. So ensure that you get that correct. So when you come here, we can see we have our get method. This will be able to get all the employees. So you can see it is getting from this table. If you want to get a specific, so this one will get a list of employees. If you want to get a specific employee, we are using an ID. So you pass an ID of that employee. So if you want to update, so this is an update method. So we will be using this method. So we'll be passing an ID. Then we have the post. So this is for creating. So we'll be creating an employee. Then we have for deleting. There it is. Then this checks if an employee exists. So if we run our API, we'll be able to see we have those methods. Remember previously we only had a weather forecast with only one method get. So you can see on our employees API, we have employees get, post, get, put, and delete. So we have two gets because one of them will retrieve all the employees, and this one with an ID at the end will give us specific employee data. So we can actually try this. So we can create our employee. So for creating, we use a post method. So we can try it. So you can click here, then try. Then an ID, can give it 0. Then we say James Kimani Mbugua. So then we get an email, jamestest@gmail.com. Then phone number is 0712345678. So then after that, click execute. There you are. So we have So you can see the employee field is required. Which one? So the invalid leading 0 before 7. So that is on the phone number. So you can just remove that. There we are. So our employee has been created with an ID 1. So this is the details of the employee. If we come to our table and just refresh this, we will see we have our employee here. Then we can create another employee. So we can create Amon, can leave in there. We can create say it. We create another one, Jane. Can create another one, Arnold. Can create another one, Vincent. So if we come to our table, we'll be able to see our employees created. So you can see we have all the employees. So to test other methods, so we have created using the post method. So to get all the employees, we can use this one. So we'll just try and execute it. We don't pass any parameter. So you can see we have all the employees provided to us. So this is the list of all the employees provided to us in JSON format. So you can see we have all the data from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is so we are using the get method to retrieve all the employees. So assuming you want to get a specific employee, so we pass an ID. So try, then pass number 4. So it will give us the employee with an ID 4. So you see, this is now how it works. So also if we want to update an employee, so we want to update an employee, so we'll pass an ID number 4. Then we say the first name should be Haron test. So you can put in test so that we track it. Test. Then you say test at gmail.com. Then for number we say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we want to update this employee, an employee with ID 4 with these details. So if we try it, there we are. So there is something going on wrong. So the ID, so this ID should be number 4. So test.com, then we execute. Something also, let's see, something went on well. Yeah, you can see we have our data updated. So number 4 is already updated with Aaron test. We can do number 2 with the same details. So just press execute. Then if we refresh on our database, you can see we have the same details on our update one. So that is a put method. So we want to delete, assume we want to delete an employee. So you only need to pass an ID. So if we pass number 4 and execute, then our data should be okay. You can see we don't have the test one. So we have left with 1. So if we delete again with an ID number 2, you can see we should be, if we refresh, this should be gone. Yes, we see we only have these employees. So if we come back to post to get and use and actually retrieve all the employees, you see we only have 3 records. So guys, that is how you create an API in ASP.NET Core. We have just seen how this works. So if we also want to, assuming we want to pass, so we can pass our controller here, employees. So sorry. So I'll just do API. Remember our root, then employees. There we are. So this is the details of the employees. You see, we have only 3 records. So that is more about ASP.NET Web API. So in case there is any comments, you can post down below, and remember to subscribe. See you on our next video. Bye.